Hey everyone, on this episode of Everything is Personal, my guest is Dr. Matt Harmody. He is a retired ER physician, a living kidney donor, an endurance athlete, and a huge advocate. Also has the Guinness World Book of Records for climbing the highest peak in all 50 US states. Much more to come. Listen to this exciting episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. And remember, everything is personal.
Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And today, our guest is Dr. Matt Harmody. Did I get it right?
Yes, sir.
All right. It helped practicing a couple of times beforehand. Matt, I wanted to ask you, in going through your book and, people may know certain chapters of your life, but I want to kind of go back earlier than that. What originally pulled you towards medicine in the first place?
Yes, that's a great place to start, Len. It completely revolved around my father's experience with kidney disease. Specifically, I could remember the date and time. I was a college sophomore finishing up finals week, then headed home for break. Got an unexpected call from my mother. She had talked my father into going into the Cleveland Clinic. And if you knew my father, that's no small feat. He was adamant about not going, finally got there and was diagnosed with complete kidney failure. So both of his kidneys had stopped working. Complete surprise to him and my mother. And they put him on emergent dialysis to save his life. And he spent the next 9 years on dialysis. And for anyone that is familiar with chronic kidney disease, especially folks on dialysis, it's not a 100% replacement for real live kidneys. And people gradually deteriorate with their health. And I saw my father, who was a avid outdoorsman, very active, healthy, just take a downward spiral over the next several years until he reached a point where he didn't want to go on living. And he withdrew dialysis care. And as you might expect, in a very short period of time, he passed. I was a chemical engineer working in the oil industry. Lesson to the listeners, always listen to your mother. My mother always thought I should have been a doctor. It took me until age 30 and my dad's experience to say, I need to do something different. I need to be able to make a difference in people's lives. So I went back to medical school at that time.
What was the reason for the kidney failure?
That's a great question. My father was not a fan of seeing doctors. So he went for many, many years without seeing a primary care provider. And that would be kind of take home point number one is certain illnesses are silent, as they say, and kidney disease is that way. He didn't really start feeling poorly until his kidneys were minimally, if not working at all. In retrospect, again, I wasn't in medicine at the time, but putting the facts that I knew together, I would say probably had uncontrolled high blood pressure or hypertension, which is one of the two biggest risk factors for developing kidney disease.
Was there a certain diet that was prevalent in your household that may have exacerbated that? Like where
I
he was
would,
eating?
yeah, so often people think that alcohol affects kidneys, but short of not getting terribly dehydrated, that's generally not the case. It's much more damaging to the liver. Diet wise, we were, kind of middle class meat and potatoes kind of family. My dad enjoyed hunting and fishing, so there was that occasionally, depending on his success. And he's the kind of guy that didn't really care. He could stand the side of a stream all day and not catch anything and be perfectly content. But nothing that I really can point to. We didn't really eat a lot of anything particular. It was a varied diet, but it probably I wouldn't eat that type of diet nowadays. Things change. It
Yeah.
That was 40-ish years ago.
Yeah, I'm just curious because you say early detection, and that goes across the board with a lot of different things. But if people have like a genetic predisposition to something, and then they go along and live their life knowing this, but food, then exercise, stress, like all these different factors that can actually exacerbate the epigenetic expression of something you may be predisposed to. So, first of all, people should know what their GPS of life is. Second of all, where your potholes are in the road. So if he didn't know that, I'm sure medicine wasn't doing that back in the day, but I'm just trying to figure out, are there any patterns? What should people be aware of? Not just going to the doctor, and I absolutely completely agree with you, go get checked out. But is there anything else that people need to be? Are there signs? Are there anything they can do on their own to make sure that they are aware and take better care of themselves?
Well, certainly, as I had mentioned, knowing the signs and symptoms of chronic illness is very important. So I am sure he went years, if not decades, without having his blood pressure checked. And in this day and age, you can have a very inexpensive device at home to do that. Likewise, knowing the signs and symptoms of type 2 or adult onset diabetes,
Yeah.
frequent urination, frequent thirst. And there was no history of diabetes, but yeah, thinking back, Len, as I kind of ponder your previous question a bit, yeah, there was some added salt. There's always salt at the table. Like I said, meat and potatoes, so a lot of protein. And he smoked. He was in the Korean War. I think picked up cigarettes there, like a lot of service personnel do. Eventually, kind of transitioned to a pipe, and then finally, my mom convinced him to stop that. But there's certainly some damage to really all tissue from smoking. And if he would have had his blood pressure managed, you mentioned stress. He epitomized the type A personality.
Yeah.
So he was an attorney. He was a large city councilman. Yeah, a lot of stress.
See, I think that's the big one. I think we talk about a lot of stuff, and people talk about stress, but I don't know if they really correlate specifically the causation of what stress can do. Like, if people really think about, stress can equal kidney disease where you have to be on dialysis. Now, I'm not making a direct correlation with one to one, but people should be aware that it's not just something that's passive. You're stressed. Okay, I can calm down. I'll meditate or some of that. It really takes a toll on your body in so many more ways than we actually even know of right now, I think.
Yes, I always am asked what people can do generally for their health, and you ask the appropriate question: what can they do themselves? Likely in addition to seeing a physician, and it's diet, exercise, and sleep.
Yeah.
And those three are the cure all. And with sleep, if you're sleeping well, you're likely managing your stress. Poor sleep leads to poor diet, which leads to worse stress. And yes, it's a vicious
Yeah.
cycle. And I mean, they equate lack of sleep and stress secondary to that to being equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for your adult life. So it's it's definitely a concern.
So take me back to your in your 30s, I think you mentioned you decided to go back to school and you're going to medical school. It's not easy. Like, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, that required some resilience. I had to fall back on my endurance training and athletics, probably really since high school. Perseverance, and quite honestly, I flunked the uh, probably first month or two of medical school. Yeah, I was never a memorizer, and the first 2 years of medical school was mostly memorization. I was an engineer. I mean, my friends laughed at me because we had open book exams all the time and they thought it was a cakewalk, but you could have 100 textbooks in front of you for those exams. And if you didn't know your stuff, you weren't going to do well. So it was, yeah, quite a change from a 9 to 5 job to being in a classroom that was mostly 22-year-old, biochemistry, biology majors that, yeah, but it built resilience and those victories are won with time and, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, as I like to say.
Yeah. And then you went into emergency medicine, is that correct?
Yes.
So you're going from engineering, you went to medical school, your dad passed and you had this experience, but now you're thrown into an ER with every single thing that you can be exposed to. How was that experience for you?
There were a lot of similarities to the engineering work I did. Most people find that surprising, but I think at the top of the list, Len, is problem solving.
Mm.
So there was a set of data, and whether you were, I worked in research and development as an engineer for part of my career. You had people's lives at stake because we were doing high temperature, high pressure uh, chemical work. And you came in every morning and you rounded on the equipment and talked with the shift staff how the shift went, and very similar to emergency medicine. Obviously, a lot more at stake, but I enjoyed the variety. Every patient, was an individual. We always joke that patients don't read the textbooks; they often come in without the classic signs and symptoms of a disease presentation. So you're challenged to sort it out. So everybody's a jigsaw puzzle, and I also enjoyed knowing a little bit about everything, which is epitomizes emergency medicine, knowing when to call for help, call a specialist, and when you could manage patients on your own.
Did it give you any new insight into humanity in the way people deal with the with situations? I kind of wanted to paint a picture this way. Like you're in the ER and there's people, maybe a gunshot wound and somebody has swallowed something and then somebody has a splinter that's like deep in their hand. It's like it runs from the most real emergency to I just need to have a conversation with somebody maybe needing some attention. Do I have the right perception of it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was both very enjoyable, but at times frustrating. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes people would be a little dismissive of someone that maybe came in with a minor complaint, but when you speak about humanity, that may be a single mother of two working two jobs, and she gets off at 10 p.m. and she's been sick for a week. That's the only time she can come in. She can't see a primary care doctor because they operate during banker's hours. And yes, you could have that woman in one room, and then right next door might be an elderly patient that's taken their last breaths, or they have recently passed, and there's family at the bedside, and it's very emotional. And then right next to them could be, an alcoholic that's, had a difficult night of drinking and may or may not be suicidal. And, it may even be a little aggressive towards the nursing staff. So you have to be able to modify your approach with each one of those patients. And it's not, one method doesn't serve all. So yes, and you have to remind yourself each and every day, Len, that you're seeing people at their worst, whether they're
Mm.
sick or badly injured, and it doesn't necessarily reflect everyone in society.
Well, I'm still trying to be empathetic and put myself in your shoes. Like if I was going into, I'm medicine adjacent. So I don't know how I would do with blood or, somebody having exposure and bone sticking out or something. How did you deal with that? I
That
know you
takes,
deal with it with medical school a little bit, but when you're dealing with it
yes,
on the fly, how is that?
that, I think for most people, that's just not a normal part of life and their upbringing. So we all get used to it. I don't care if someone may differ. I don't think they're being completely honest. I recall a story. I was probably 11 or 12 down using my father's table saw, just messing around cutting wood. And I didn't have a block behind the piece of wood. The block was my thumb. And I cut halfway through it and shockingly didn't cut the whole thing off. And of course, your first reaction is just to jerk it back. And that sent a stream of blood across the basement. And I screamed, and my mom came running down, and it probably looked like a massacre with all the blood. And I didn't do too terribly well with the 3 whopping stitches that went in my thumb in the emergency department. But you get used to it. And I can recall in medical school having to lead a room in which a procedure was being done, and it was hot because the surgeon had bright lights on what he was doing, and I had to quietly walk out. I thought I was going to pass out, and I found a wheelchair in a hallway and just sat down and collected myself. So yes, we have those moments, but I don't think you ever truly get used to it, but you are able to tolerate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared that story because I, even when I'm giving blood, I always tell them I'm like, and I'm all tattooed, so it's not the needles, but it's I don't know what it is, the blood leaving the body or some of that. I have a tendency to get lightheaded. Let's just say.
Yeah, I've never had a great answer to that. Now that you brought it up, Len, I mean, of course I've saw many folks with tattoos over the years, and some of them would be the most nervous people about getting blood drawn or an IV
Uh,
started, and they explained it almost exactly the way you did. It's like I'm not really sure. Yes, I have a number of tattoos, but this is different. Was usually the answer I got.
Completely different feeling. Yeah, completely different. Uh, I didn't ask you, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, 2 younger siblings.
So, growing up, you were you were into sports, right? Was that sort of your primary passion?
I did several different things. My father was very big on work.
Okay.
So I had a summer job every summer, and I delivered the Cleveland Plain Dealer for about 4 years, when it was still a daily newspaper. And in high school, I pretty much was a distance runner. So I ran track and cross country year round. And yeah, I went to an all boys Jesuit high school, and I wasn't really challenged academically in grade school. So my rude awakening was high school. For a lot of folks, that might be college. So yeah, I had a pretty steady routine up at 5:30, delivered papers, caught the bus, school all day, running till 6 or so, bus home, dinner, studies, to bed, rinse and repeat.
Yep. So pretty disciplined environment. Look, so you shared your dad's journey, but do you remember when the idea of kidney donation first entered your awareness?
Yes, it was very early on the onset of his illness,
Mm.
and being on dialysis. I I went to our medical school library and did a little bit of research on my own with some help from the staff, because it was all new to me. What's dialysis about? What's it do? And are there alternatives? And so living kidney donation was briefly discussed. I had 2 uncles and myself. We probably would have been on the short list of being a potential living donor for my father, except one small hiccup. My father did not want to have a living kidney donor. He was 50 at the time and felt that he had lived a full life and did not want to jeopardize anyone else's life on his behalf. And I always saw that as a really a missed opportunity to really help my father, make a difference in his life, um, given all the things he did for me to that point.
I mean, 50 is so young. I'm 54. 50 is so young. Is there, it's so, I'm trying to process that. He thought that he lived a full life. He didn't have to do anything, or that he just didn't want anybody to sacrifice themselves on his behalf.
Yes, I think probably a combination of those, Len. And I think also there was a lack of understanding of what living kidney donation was about.
Mm.
And I can't honestly say, what the risks were as far as percentages. It is major at that time. It is major surgery. I certainly can talk to all the numbers nowadays, but I don't think he realized that it's a pretty safe procedure. It is major surgery. Also don't think he realized that people return to a full and active life, which again is all about the book Ascending America and people being active, very active before donation and picking up right where they left off after donation. It in no way means that you have to be an outstanding athlete to be a donor. I know hundreds of people that are living kidney donors, and they're relatively inactive. I know people that have actually become much more active because they felt kind of a calling to take a little bit better care of themselves because they only had one kidney.
So, kind of walk me through the process. And I know it's in a book, but like, what's the process of making a decision to be a living kidney donor? And then what are the fears and doubts? Like, what do you wrestle with? What goes through somebody's mind when they make that decision?
Yes. So for me, Len, it wasn't so much an aha moment. When I started working in emergency medicine, I probably saw a dialysis patient every day, every shift, and they all reminded me of my father and what he went through. And it was just really just a minimal existence for folks that aren't familiar with dialysis. Most people are going to a dialysis center 3 times a week, sitting in a chair for 4 hours at a time, having on a machine, blood being taken out, filtered, and then returned to the person. And it's 3 times a week, and they spend the rest of that day recovering, and following day kind of sluggish and so, and then back the next day for dialysis. So it's life, but I I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So my decision was kind of gradual, and my perspective really changed. I had mentioned a few minutes ago, Len, that I thought it was a missed opportunity not to donate to my father. But now, in hindsight, when I look back, he was just selfless in that he gave me the opportunity to donate one of my kidneys to someone else to save their life. And I donated to a stranger back in 2017. I would also add that you don't have to be a medical professional to be a donor. Of course, I understood a little bit more than someone that maybe is not in healthcare, but I also know plenty of people across all spectrums, young, old, healthcare, have nothing to do with healthcare. Um, Family member needed a kidney to, I saw someone post on Facebook that they needed a kidney and everything in between. So everyone has a story to tell without question. You just don't wake up one day out of the blue and decide you want to donate a kidney, but the stories vary as to the number of individuals that are living kidney donors.
Did anyone close to you struggle with this idea or try to talk you out of it or try to protect you or questioning, are you insane? What are you doing, Matt?
Let me see how many people do you want to hear about? We'll start with person number one in my life, my wife. We recently were talking about this. Uh, we met. My dad passed about 6 months before we met, so she never had a chance to meet him. Of course, she's heard a lot about him over the years. She has no medical background, and I think would fall in the category of a concerned spouse that really didn't understand the procedure and the recovery, and she wanted no part of taking care of a surgical wound. So she had to think and pray a lot about it, and she realized how important it was to me. And eventually was very, very supportive. I have two nieces that are higher risk for developing kidney disease. One has insulin dependent diabetes. And of course, that's, as we talked earlier, a risk factor for developing kidney disease. And secondly, I have another niece that has an ill formed kidney, so it functions maybe at 20 or so percent of normal. Now, people have to understand that we're over designed with respect to kidneys. Obviously, we can live with one. And people estimate that we have 2 to 3 times the needed function between our two kidneys. And actually, it's been shown that your remaining kidney grows somewhat in size and function after you donate. So, yes, there was some skepticism. I had a former physician partner uh, ask me straight away, why would anyone in their right mind want to donate a kidney? And, you know, he certainly knows better, but that's how he felt.
Uh, you know, you just mentioned you have family members. So I'm kind of thinking part of the concern may be like you're given your kidney, but what if we need it? You
Mm-hmm.
know, you have nieces, you have what if, God forbid, something happens to me? Now you just gave it away. Now we have no choice. Did that come up at all in your thought process?
Oh, absolutely. And that I certainly thought about that. It really didn't give me much pause. I think the chances are very, very small that someone would need a kidney someday in my family, my circle of friends. It's not zero. And I just thought about, you know, taking two perfectly functioning kidneys to my deathbed. I would have regretted that, especially with my father's experience. And certainly that could be hard for some people to relate. But if you don't know someone that is on dialysis, it'll change your perspective very quickly.
So maybe you can let people know or share what life kind of looks like after donation. I'm sure there's physical, post-operative things that you have to do, but is there an emotional part that's also involved with healing?
Well, I'll start first with that last part. I'm smiling, Len, because I think my family talked about this recently. Shortly after surgery, within a couple of months, I just felt like I was more emotional than I had ever been in my life. And I just really couldn't put my finger on it. So I called my transplant nurse coordinator, and it's like, Amy, have you ever heard or noticed this or heard other patients complain? And she was quick to just respond and said, no, that's not a thing. You're just getting older, which, we all know. We become more emotional as we get older. But back to the recovery. Yeah, so it's general anesthesia. It was about a 5-hour operation for me. It's the first time I've ever spent the night in a hospital as a patient. Of course, I spent many a night working in the emergency department. I went home in a couple of days, but I was up to a chair that afternoon, walking in the halls the following day, very stir crazy and anxious to get home. Started doing a fair amount of walking. Now you have to understand, I've been an endurance junkie all my life, so this doesn't relate to everyone, but I was running 100K trail races for several years. And I had a race coming up about 4 months, a little bit less than 4 months after my surgery. And I was able to finish that without too much trouble. And that was really my final mark on that I was 100% recovered. Um, and there's probably two things I do differently to this day. One, especially living in North Carolina with the heat, albeit not being the case here lately. I'm much more careful about drinking fluids. I probably took more chances when I was younger and before surgery. So I'm very careful about that. And secondly, non-steroidal pain medications can be harmful to kidneys, especially in excess. So that's your ibuprofen, Motrin, Advil. So I don't take any of those. I simply can take acetaminophen, or the brand name is Tylenol. Most people would recognize that without any difficulty. So very little. There are very few complications. I also might add that the risk, the mortality risk, that is dying from the operation or shortly thereafter, is on par with a woman delivering a baby at full term. So, we take that for granted, and that probably happens hundreds of times in this country every day. So, keeping those things in perspective, I think, are important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you share that because I think it gives people a visual perspective of what somebody will go through, especially, you being a healthcare practitioner, so seeing all this and then, going through that as a patient yourself, you kind of see it from both sides. You already mentioned this emotional kind of side, but was there any other changes that you noticed in yourself that maybe you didn't expect after donating?
I would, I don't know, I'm still convinced I'm a little bit more emotional. I I'll get very emotional when I hear other people's donation stories. And regarding the book, all five of us have our donor and recipient stories in there, and I would say that's the best part of the book, hands down. And they're all different, and they're all much more interesting than mine in particular. Um, I think I'm a lot more understanding. Emergency medicine simply certainly made me more understanding of the difficulties that people face each and every day, and a lot of things that I would take for granted. I would count my blessings. I would see a gentleman having a heart attack that has to go to the cath lab, and I would look at his demographic information because it's like, wow, he looks about my age, and he's 10 years younger than I am, having a heart attack, and those things, you just begin to really count your blessings. And people struggle with a lot of illness and other challenges, whether it's affording health insurance or being able to afford raising children, and all those, as you well know, Len, affect your health. There are a countless number of stressors, and all those stressors add up to affect people both, mentally and as well as physically.
So tell me sort of your thought process for deciding to do the peak climbs in the States and Kilimanjaro, I believe, as well. What prompted you to do that?
So there are two relatively different stories. You mentioned Kilimanjaro. I climbed it with 21 other
Yeah.
living kidney donors back in 2022. That's interesting in that I always wanted to try doing something like that. My wife has absolutely no interest in being out in the elements or exerting yourself to the level that's required to do something like that. So I got an email from a kidney donor organization, asking for people to, if they were interested, and you had to submit an application and have a little interview, and no non-donors were allowed. So it was just all going to be donors. It's like, all right, this is perfect. Because I didn't want to go badly enough to go by myself. So my wife stayed home. I joined a group of people, none of which I'd ever met before, and had a great experience. The 50-state summit trip, our captain, Dave Ashley, is really excels in mountaineering, and he has done what's called the 7 summits. So that's climbing the highest peak in all 7 continents. And he did that incredibly within a year's 12-month period of time. But we decided, especially Dave, that a lot of people can't relate to going to Everest or even Kilimanjaro, even though Kilimanjaro is much more of a hike than what I would call a climb. There's no technical skill required. And he wanted to bring something closer to home where more people could relate to. And when I talk about our trip, and I ask people if they know where their state high point is, the majority of people know, and a significant percentage of those people have actually been to their high point. So a lot of people can relate to that. And then I think the icing on the cake was that we came across the fact that there was a Guinness World Record for it. And the 5 of us on the team are all pretty competitive people. And it just made it a lot more interesting because first and foremost, the goal was to raise awareness for living kidney donation. So we had a social media page. People followed us. We answered questions. We did a lot of postings and kept everybody up to speed as to how we were doing and the progress we were making.
Was it the same group that did Kilimanjaro and the peaks, or was it different people?
Interestingly, 3 of us overlapped. So 3 of us met on Kilimanjaro on that trip. And then we came back together along with Dave, Ashley, and Jody, another one of the climbers, to make up the team.
What prompted you to actually write a book?
I'll give you the short version of that story, Len. It was actually Emily's idea. She was my fellow crewmate on the trip. She's got a library science background, much more gifted writer than I am. So she started from day one thinking about writing the book, and we interviewed everyone on the team before and after the trip. She had a family illness that took her away from the trip for a period of time. So I offered to kind of be the eyes and ears and the recorder on the trip, and that we would come back to write the book together. Fortunately, the family illness was not as severe as was initially anticipated. So we continued to work together to co-author it, but she was super busy working 2 jobs. I'd recently retired. I had the time. We just couldn't kind of come together on a schedule, and she decided she couldn't keep up with what needed to be done as far as the writing was concerned. And then I probably spent a week thereafter thinking, all right, careful what you wish for. Do I want to tackle this whole project myself? I went in engineering, Len, for a reason. I was not a writer. I was not creative. I wanted numbers. I wanted problems to solve. So it was a whole new experience writing a book. I learned a lot. The single biggest recommendation there for a first-time author would be to get a writing coach, which I finally did. Made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I would say engineers are are very creative. So my dad was an engineer, even though linear, but pretty creative if he's put in that position. You have to figure it out, right?
Yes, you do, and there are different definitions of creativity. Growing up, I would have rattled off art, music, those just classic writing, as classic creative endeavors. But you're right. I mean, really, anything in life involves creativity.
I'm gonna ask this question. It just popped in my head. I'm just curious. Is it easier? I don't know if easier is even the right way to ask it, but when you're donating a kidney to somebody, do you want to meet the person that you donated the kidney to? And is it a different type of experience? Because I'm sure in your uh people that you've done this with, some of them met people, some of them didn't. They're just doing it anonymously. There's a certain altruism to this, right? And then when you actually meet the person, you're getting that person you donated to, so you have a connection of life. I don't know if easier is the right adjective to use, but does it is it a different experience when you're doing it for a person that you actually have that you met than doing it like anonymously?
Yeah, that's a great question. And almost without exception, when I get talking with someone that is asking about kidney donation, that comes up. Usually it's just to the point. Did you ever meet your recipient?
Uh,
Um, and of course, folks that are donating to a family or friend obviously meet their recipient. But in the case when you're, most people refer to it as non directed. So I'm not directing a kidney to someone in particular. Some people still do call it altruistic. Um, so it's an anonymous process, and you never meet each other unless both people agree to meet. So in my case, I was interested in meeting my recipient. So the social worker that works with both recipients and donors at a transplant center asked me to write a note to my recipient. So I did that, and then I know she's a she because she wrote me a note back and was very thankful. It was a very touching note. She's a grandmother. But for whatever reason, she wasn't interested in meeting in person. And I think you just have to know that, Len, going in, that there's a chance that you might not meet your recipient. I think my wife was a little bit more disappointed that we didn't meet than I was. And maybe I accepted that fact. Obviously, since I wrote the note, I was interested in meeting her. But I just can't put myself in a recipient's shoes. And I mean, how does that feel to meet someone that is donated an organ to you? I would say on average, non-directed donors, about half meet their recipient, and half don't. I think the relationships that people have with their recipient are just unbelievable and heartfelt. And again, those stories are in the book. Emily in particular, she responded to a Facebook ad, just call the number. The recipient, the eventual recipient, lived in her community, and to this day, they families get together, they go out to dinner. It's just unbelievably touching and has such an impact on people's lives. I met a gentleman yesterday that actually donated to a child. She was 10 years old when she received his kidney. And now she's, I think, mid 20s. And she's like another daughter to us. So the stories are just unbelievable. Especially sometimes in this day and age where you get down on what you hear going on around this world. You can really take some comfort in hearing some of the stories from people that have donated a kidney.
I think it's such a beautiful thing, but when you're going into it anonymously, expectations are most likely I'm giving it and that's it. I'm going to let it be. And when you have this opportunity to actually meet the person and then they make a decision that, I'm not, thank you so much, but I'm going to live my life for whatever reason, it's got to be, I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but it has to feel a certain way. Like, how did that make you feel in the moment, and how did you reside to that fact?
Yes, you could beat yourself up quite a bit in that aspect. I thought you were going to go on to say how would you feel about someone not taking care of themselves as well as you think maybe they should with your organ in their body, right?
That's a good second question. Let's
Yeah.
ask that one too.
um, it's a gift, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that whatever that gift is, whether it's money, help with taxes, what have you, people can make the decision to and how they use your gift, and it's a gift. There should be no strings attached. So yes, and I saw patients all the time when not a lot of transplant patients, but a decent number of them. I can think of one young man, he's probably in his 20s, already having received a kidney transplant. He ran out of his medications. Is people may or may not know, recipients for life take anti-rejection medications to keep their body from rejecting the kidney. And he ran out, and there he was in the emergency department feeling bad, and he was feeling bad because his kidney was starting to fail. And I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, what a gift he's received. And that's how he's treating it. So it's hard not to be judgmental, but yeah, it's a gift without strings attached.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. Um, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but I'm just thinking there's so much new technology that's coming out with, organ printing and 3D printing of different things. Do you feel like, or do you know where we are with technology to see if we can actually, because you reminded me of this anti-rejection medication, but if they're printing it or if they're using your own stem cells to create that, maybe it'll minimize or mitigate that rejection. Are you familiar with any, latest and greatest research that's going into that?
Yes, there's several fronts that I think are all very promising, but most of it, I think people would agree, is a few to several years out. And I'll just kind of mention the top three or four. That's probably a whole separate conversation for each of them. People want first, people have probably heard about pig kidneys. So those have been successfully. They get kind of washed with some what are called antigens, so they
Mm-hmm.
become less have less rejection potential. And I think 60 some days has been the longest, and it's been in a living person, so someone that left the hospital. I think it was removed for non-kidney related issues. I don't remember the details, but yes, that was done at NYU Langone, and that's very promising. Secondly, yes, stem cells have created what I would call test tube kidneys, and they grow those kidneys on kind of a lattice structure. I'm not. I'm certain that those have not been transplanted in humans. I'm not sure if they have been in animal models yet. And a third area that's probably just as promising is that they're speaking of stem cells. They're taking blood from the donor in advance. Of course, all kinds of testing, but this blood is set aside, and then they are coming back later and giving kind of a treated sample of blood to the recipient in order to almost change, in some cases, change their blood type so that they then won't reject their transplanted kidney with the tremendous advantage of being able to come off most, if not all, of their anti-rejection medications. So while a living kidney is the way to go versus a deceased kidney, you are committed to lifelong medications. You have to be careful about illness. Your immune system is compromised, and if you could rid recipients of all that, just be a tremendous boon to those that are receiving kidneys. So yes, there's several technologies on the forefront. I cheer them all on. But on the flip side, Len, there's 90,000 plus people on the transplant wait list today for a kidney. And if it's several years off, there's as many as 40,000 people could be added to the list every year. There's just a ton of people in need today.
So if somebody's listening right now and they're feeling sort of on the edge of making a hard decision, what do they need to hear? And the second part of that question is, um, if somebody has a certain lifestyle or they've have a certain disease that affects their kidneys, just because you're donating a kidney to them, I know you said no strings attached, but are there things that people need to be aware of when you're donating a kidney that, maybe whatever condition that caused that is already addressed? They just need a replacement kidney and that'll be fine. But how do they know that just replacing a kidney is going to address the actual cause or the disease that had caused their kidney to go bad in the first place?
Yes, I'll take the second question first. This will kind of bleed into the first question, but everyone is extensively tested, and that means anyone that's being placed on the transplant wait list, as well as any prospective living kidney donors. And it's very conservative on both sides. So in other words, if you're older and you have a heart condition, and you may, the risk is very high for you to undergo general anesthesia, you're probably not going to be approved to be on the wait list. This is a very limited resource, that being kidneys, to be donated, and they're trying to get them into the most appropriate people. So kids are going to be at the top of the list. And very young people are going to likely need multiple kidneys. Living kidneys, on average, last about 15 to 20 years, which is about twice as long as a deceased donor kidney. So people are screened on all fronts, medically certainly, and even psychologically, especially living kidney donors. So if you have a history of mental health illness, or maybe during your evaluation you have ulterior motives for wanting to be a kidney donor, that goes to the transplant center's review board that's made up by several healthcare professionals and in some cases lay people, and they decide on whether you would be an appropriate living kidney donor. So the guidelines are pretty strict. I wish we had more kidneys, then we probably could transplant certainly more people. They started to relax some of the guidelines. In other words, if you had any type of diabetes, type 2, non-insulin dependent being the most common, you were excluded for being a donor. Now, if your diabetes is well controlled and only on one medication that you take, and it's not insulin, you could be considered for donation. So they started to expand that a bit. On your first question about if someone has an interest, I would provide two. Well, let me say this first, and then a couple of quick websites to go to. One, at any time during the process, you can say no. I changed my mind. I can remember being asked that in the preoperative area when they were giving me a local anesthetic. Secondly, there are tons of benefits out there for living kidney donors. So there's lost wage reimbursement. There's help with care. If you say have elderly parents you're caring for, there's money available for that. So there's a lot of the disincentives that existed do not exist anymore. You'd ask, what about my two nieces, for example? What if they need a kidney? So there are programs that exist that are called voucher programs. So if I were to donate today, I would name my two nieces, and you can name up to 5 people that would be given a voucher if, in fact, they needed a kidney someday. Now, the voucher is only worth one kidney, but it would go to the person that first needed that kidney. So that kind of removes, to some degree, the risk of that question of, well, what if someone in our circle needs a kidney someday? The two resources, one is kidneyregistry.org, and that's the National Kidney Registry. They're the largest living kidney donor organization, and they provide those benefits along with many more that I haven't mentioned. There's a button on their homepage that says, donor or recipient, and you click through, and there's a lot of information there. And you can even start the process by answering a few screening questions. And then the other organization I would mention, Len, in which I'm the chair of the board for, it's a nonprofit, the National Kidney Donation Organization. That's a mouthful, but it's nkdo.org. And we have maybe 5,500 members, about a third living kidney donors, but a lot of recipients, a lot of family members. It's kind of the go-to place for all information related to kidney donation, chronic kidney disease.
Looking back, kind of hindsight, what mattered less than you thought that it would, and what mattered more than you thought that it would when you were going into this?
I would say that what mattered less in hindsight is waiting as long as I did. I would have donated much sooner. I think I was, cautious. We had 2 young boys coming out of medical school, and still in the back of my head, even though I was a physician, what if there was a complication during surgery? And people would argue, that's an unnecessary surgery. You don't have to have it, right? You don't have to have your appendix that's burst taken out. So that, I think I overthought that risk pretty significantly. And then on the flip side, the recovery was pretty minimal. I thought it would be much more challenging. And again, it's the unknown.
Yeah.
You talk to people, you get their experiences, but everybody's different. And yes, did I have to take it slower than I wanted? Certainly, but I returned to everything that I could do pre-donation without difficulty.
Amazing. All right, Matt. I have some questions that I ask all my guests, unrelated to anything we're talking about, more
Okay.
music related stuff. I guess. Let's see how we do that.
All right.
If you remember, what was the very first concert that you attended?
That's pretty easy. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Michael Stanley Band. They were a Cleveland product. I would say they probably reached local to regional significance, probably not national. But I saw them when they were first getting started. I was in high school, probably 15. They played in a local high school, not mine,
Right.
but I went with a buddy of mine, and yeah, it was the first concert that I attended.
Cool. Well, what was the last concert you attended?
That would have been what's left of the Beach Boys, and that would have was last. I guess it's already been February or March. My wife and I took a trip to the Keys. Um, I'm pretty certain I was all the way down there as a kid, but not certainly anything terribly memorable. And we were just going down there to get some warm weather and hang out. And I was just paging through a list of things to do in the area, and sure enough, they were performing an outdoor concert, and oh my gosh, yeah, that was such a treat.
What was John Stamos on drums with them or no?
Yes, I believe so.
That's funny. All right, one more music question. For next year, you could only listen to 5 albums. Now, you don't have to remember the name of the actual album. It can be just the artist if you want. But what would be those 5 albums?
I I'm a big Godspell fan. I actually my one and only time on stage was in eighth grade, and some of the songs were from Godspell, and I had to sing "Prepare Ye" as a solo, and I was horrible. But yeah, love the musical, love the music.
See, and you
First,
were saying you're not artistic. See, you had it
yeah,
all in you
see,
the whole time.
I think I was the only guy that was willing to stand up on stage by himself, so I got tapped. First album was Linda Ronstadt, so her greatest hits would be on that list. Um, I believe Michael Stanley also has a greatest hits album. I know I'm kind of cheating a bit, but um, I enjoyed and still do Madonna's music, and probably the Immaculate Conception. Is that the name of one of her
Yeah, immaculate.
albums?
Yep.
Um, how many is that? Four?
Yep.
I'll cheat and say the Beach Boys.
There you go.
Not yeah, there's not. I'm not going to come up with a album of theirs, but yeah, different genres.
Yeah. Surfing,
Depending on
Surfing USA.
yeah, that's a great one.
Rather than Pet Sounds. All right. So, Matt, final question for you. Please describe what your room looked like when you were growing up.
We had a small brick house, middle class city of Cleveland, upstairs bedroom, shared with my younger brother, 6 years younger, carpeted, uh, two beds that maybe were twin at best, and we both ended up being 6'3". So yeah, feet hanging off those beds pretty early on. It didn't take very long before probably me more so than my brother wanted my own space. So we had these floor to ceiling shelving units that we stacked back to back. So that was kind of the dividing line of the room. Of course, we had a Nerf hoop and on the closet door, and many of Nerf games were played. The closet could not have been 3 feet wide and was just packed to the gills, and it was the access area to the attic. So, Christmas time when all the decorations would have to be pulled down, we had to empty out the whole closet to get to everything. Yeah, two windows. We each had a window. Um, yeah,
Any artwork or posters or anything like that? Any on the walls?
yeah, I was into. I would have had a cycling poster because I did a lot of riding pretty early on. It probably was just an old Tour de France poster. Um, there seems like they would have been sports related. We didn't have any scantily clad women on our walls. Mom would have
I like
Not
that.
approved.
Matt, I want to thank you for being on the show. Where can people find out more about you? Where can they get a copy of Ascending America? Anything else you want to share?
Yes, all the above really can be found at my website, and that's mattharmodymd.com. And you can read about the book there. There are links there if you care to purchase it online. If you prefer brick and mortar, it's been in a lot of local bookstores for individual reports from family and friends.
Great. And for my audience, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all those great things. Let's keep this going. I really enjoy all the wonderful comments and great reviews. Thank you so much. The not so wonderful ones, bring them on as well. We'll learn and we get better at that. Uh, you can still buy my book on Amazon. Just look at my name, and there's two new ones coming out. But just want to say once again, thank you so much. I mean, it's incredible what I know you're humble to this, but it really is incredible to give the gift of life to somebody. There's no greater gift that you can possibly give to anyone. And I think you not only did you do this, but creating an environment for people to feel safe, educated, and inspired to do so. I think it's a wonderful work that you do. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, and one last thought, Len. You can be an ordinary person and make an extraordinary gift to someone and save a life.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you. Hey, everyone. So, does anybody know what greening out means? I've been the recipient of so many calls over the years of people greening out. That means they took too much THC and had an adverse reaction. So I always recommend other things, but nothing really concrete. Now I can. There's a solution. It is called Antidose. Antidose.com is quick, it's rapid, it works immediately, safe, and effective. So I love my props. If you are toasty or you are burnt, that's the difference. Now, I also love the 1 gummy, 2 gummy, 3 gummy floor. So just be aware, very narrow therapeutic window. You know exactly what you can take now if you've taken too much. Once again, it's Antidose at antidose.com. Get yours today. Hey, everyone. Thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this episode, and hit that bell. Like, comment. I so appreciate that. And check me out on social under Len May or Len May DNA. Find out more on LinkedIn or lenmaycoaching.com. And remember, everything is personal.